That is Laura. This is Kyle. And this is He Said, She Said. Laura, how are you?
I'm good. Kyle, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I hope your weekend was good.
My weekend was awesome. Cold, but great.
Cool. So what's going on tonight? What are we talking about?
Well, interestingly enough, I had a conversation with a client yesterday who's also a friend who just ended a relationship. It was, a 9-month relationship, and really she had thought that this was someone who she might consider spending her life with. And after the fact, now she's saying, I missed some signs. She's ready to, she really wants to be in a relationship. And she asked me the question, what are the right questions? How can I ask the right questions when I'm dating someone so that I really can get to the bottom of exactly what I want?
So that I make sure I understand what's going on. So she had dated this guy. What was the guy's stats?
The guy's stats, divorced with 2 kids.
Okay.
They also had long distance going for them. He was European. So she was spending probably more time over there in Europe, and she wasn't loving. As she got to know him and his parenting, she really did not love the whole parenting thing.
Sure.
She didn't agree all the way with his choices in parenting. But there seemed to also be a lot of, they were accusing each other a lot of, you don't really love me, you don't love me enough, if you loved me, that kind of stuff. And she... it was a funky thing, and so now she's looking forward. She wants to know, how am I going to, how can I strategize my question asking on dates so I can really find someone that fits?
So she's going through her relationship debrief, right?
Yeah, totally.
So, as I think about what her ask is, I don't know if she'll be happy with the answer that I'm going to give her. Because I don't think, Laura, there is a set of questions that we can ask that's going to suddenly shed light on all the dark crevices that we have, right? People can lie. I mean, let's be frank, all right? At the beginning of any relationship, and we'll use 8-month, 9-month mark, I mean, it's still rainbows and butterflies. He's still texting you every morning, and she's still calling you every night. We're going to be on our best behavior, all right? We're not going to let the toilet seat up when we go to sleep, and we're going to make sure that the mirror and the bathroom sink is cleaned off. So we're not going to be our true selves during that period of time. So any question that would be asked is always going to have a tinge of rose color to the answer, correct?
Okay.
I think you got to look at his behavior, and I think that she did that. She told you that she saw his parenting and didn't like the way that was going. She would have never gotten that had she asked any question at all. So I just don't know if there is a group of questions that someone can ask either a guy or a girl that's really going to get to the bottom of it. I think that if you know what you're looking for, and you've got, as we've talked about before, we've got the must-haves. I think that you can ask questions that clearly address your must-haves, like, what's your views on certain, moral questions or religion or things like that. I mean, those broad that you really, can't, the easy pitches, right?
Right.
But when it gets down to the nitty gritty, I don't think you can do that. I think at the end of the day, you've got to see that individual, for lack of a better term, in action. And that's why they call it dating.
I couldn't agree. I actually could not agree more in that area. I think there's a couple of places where people get hung up, and I think she observed his actions far before she came to the conclusion that it wasn't going to be it, because there were a lot of other words in between, things like, "I love you so much," and, you know, all of the words that, the words that can sometimes convince us that the actions aren't really what we thought we saw.
Right.
You know, and I think that sometimes hangs people up, because I do agree with you that it's about the actions, it's about behavior. Here's my thing. I think it's great to ask questions around behavior that you observe.
Sure.
So, right? So I think that's where I think the whole, I push curiosity all the time. That's where I think curiosity comes in handy, right? So, you observe something that you really are going, no, not into that. That's not going to work for me. And then you have the opportunity to say, how did you think about what you did? Like, is that really how you wanted to act? Or tell me about what made you do that. I think it's fun to get the questions can come in handy then.
But human nature kind of avoids that because that's so confrontational. Let's just use her example. So she saw him doing something that was just clearly outside of her comfort level and the way that she was parenting, or the way that he was parenting his kids, right? The first question is, how do you bring that up? She's not the kid's mother. She doesn't have kids of her own. How could she legitimately go to him and say, why are you parenting your kids that way when she's never done so? And I'm assuming she had no children, so... But even if not...
That's a tough one because she doesn't have children, so it's going to constantly be turned on her that, you don't have kids, you don't know. But listen, hey, you know it and I know it because you are in a long-term relationship with someone who you love. If you can't, over time, ask those questions, learn how to communicate with that person, ask those tough questions, you will never get the answers that are going to help you to decide if this is the person that you want to continue down that road. Listen, I believe in this. There's only two things that will allow you to know if you've chosen well for yourself. And one is time, and one is shared experiences. That's it, in my estimation. You can talk all you want. You can share 48 uninterrupted hours of making love and talking, and that's really great. But there is nothing that can give you more certainty around your relationship than time and shared experiences. And you can't rush those things. They happen. So, I'm a firm believer in that. But Drew and I have been in many situations where I have done something or he has done something that to the very core of us was offensive. Like in some way, just for a second, we were like, who the hell is this person I'm with? And you know what? You have to learn the skills and the tools for call it confrontation, I'll call it communication.
There's one difference between your friend's story, your client's story, and yours. You've got 5 years of history built up between you and Drew, and she's got 8 months of a long-distance relationship with a guy in Europe, right? And I'll say this, and we can talk about long-distance relationships some other time. I've done them. I didn't do them well. I've got a whole theory around long-distance relationships that we'll talk about some other time. So I don't necessarily know if she had the history with this guy to really leverage those tough conversations at such an early point in the relationship.
I agree. I feel for her because that was what actually needed to happen. Those difficult conversations kind of had to take place perhaps sooner than the average because there was so much more, there was more involved. There was more, complex logistics in her particular situation. But on average, if we're not talking about like an international long distance and we're not talking about some of the more extreme situations, what would you say would be the appropriate length of time? When do you start having those challenging type.
I don't know, Laura, if there is an on-off switch where after this day we start
Right.
having them and not. I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that, bear in mind, these most of the time these difficult conversations all revolve around behavior, right?
Oh,
Behavior
always.
that one person has seen in another that they don't agree with in some shape or form.
Correct.
I think a lot of when you should have that conversation has to do with the severity, or I guess how offensive, if you will, the behavior was, right? You can't fall on the sword on every single issue, right? You got to let some stuff slide. However, there are some things, though, that when you see that behavior, right, and it goes back to something we talked about a while back, and I mentioned it a moment ago, you've got to have your must-haves. If
Yeah.
you see a behavior that individual is exhibiting and it's bumping up against your must-have, you got to have that conversation. I don't care if it's date 3. Because if you don't address it and you push it off, or you close your eyes and close your ears and act like it didn't happen, you're only delaying the inevitable. And what is a difficult conversation today, but yet you can part ways and maybe be friends, becomes an awful conversation later on, and you either get divorced or you want to shoot each other. My response to your client would have been this, is that, what was it? Did you have some boundaries? Did you have some of those must-haves established before you got into a relationship with this guy? And if you didn't, before you begin to ask, well, what should I have asked him to really figure all this out, you got to ask yourself some questions first. And then once you have the answers to those questions, normally you won't have to ask him any, because you'll be able to see, based on just pure observances, if he's fitting in with those must-haves that you've talked about and you've established for yourself.
What happens when you challenge someone? I'm throwing in another example from another client. Okay, so he's got a girlfriend, but he's still asking out my client and still courting her.
Okay.
And he keeps telling her, I'm going to take care of the girlfriend, because I really, really want to be with you. And, and of course it will be different with you. She thinks that her boundary has been put down by saying, I can't go out with you if you still have a girlfriend. And things will be better when there's no girlfriend and he can, be with me.
First off, I think she's made the absolute right choice. All right. She's made the right decision, because first, I'll say this. That boundary is giving him the benefit of the doubt, because here's the deal. And I'd have to ask her this. If he's doing that to her, are you so special to think that he won't do it to you too? Right? When that guy calls you and says, I got this other girlfriend I'm going to take, but I really want to go ahead and go out with you now, you hang up the phone with him and you don't call him again for one reason, Laura. He just proved the type of character that he has. It's all about him. I don't care who he is, how good looking he is, how much money he's got, how suave and debonair he is. He's a liar. And leopards usually don't change their spots. Kind of just going back for a moment, leaving the name calling out of it, right?
Yep.
I agree with that, right? There's no sense in calling, calling them bad names or the liars or whatever, because really at that point you stop making it about the issue and you're beginning to make it personal. And listen, I've been in leadership positions within organizations for years, and I've taken management classes and leadership classes. When you're having a conflict with someone, never make it about the person. Always keep it about the issue. Same situation here within relationships, right? If she did something wrong, okay, she made a mistake. Fair enough, okay? Now, That doesn't mean that you all of a sudden begin personal attacks on her. Make it about the issue. You'll have to work out the ramifications of whatever he or she has done. That doesn't absolve them of that, but making it personal just doesn't get you anywhere, right? Because chances are you'll forgive her for what she's done, but she's not going to forget the name calling, nor should she.
And you know what else, Kyle? I'm going to say something else. And if she or he's been doing something and you feel like you need to say, or you feel that, yes, they always do that, then how do I say this nicely? Yes, you need to bring it to their attention, but you also have to think about why you've never said anything before now.
Sure.
If it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
I could not agree more. And that's why I think, as you talk about the must-haves, so listen, if there was one takeaway, if I go back in time prior to meeting Drew, and when I was going through this process and wondering how am I going to really find the person that I meant to be with, I didn't realize at that moment just how critical knowing your must-haves are and making them crystal clear boundaries.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely.
The most important thing you need to know if you truly want to find someone with whom you can build and sustain a relationship.
And Laura, people don't get that.
No.
And here's why I think that they don't get that. When you create those boundaries, and I know I guess we're staying on task here. When you create those boundaries and you put those hard stops in place, inevitably, you will find someone that appears on the surface to be just perfect. He or she has almost everything you're looking for. Add on top of that you probably haven't gone out in 6 months, or you've been going out with only jerks or whomever. So you meet this person. It's like the heavens have opened up and delivered this person into your hands. However, he bumps up against one of your boundaries, or she bumps up against one of your must-haves.
Must-haves.
And that is a difficult situation, because in the back of your mind, usually one of two things is happening.
Okay.
It's really not that big of a deal, Kyle. I know that she does that, but it's really not that big of a deal. Or the better one, I can get her to change.
Oh.
But it happens. Am I not right? It happens every single time. So we go ahead and we drop that. We dish the must-have. We eject it. And now we've brought this person into our lives only 6, 8, 9, 12 months later to revisit it and have the problem that you had forgotten about back when the relationship was young, because the butterflies and the rainbows are going to fly away and disappear, and then you're going to be left with the real hard relationship facts of life.
Just so hard for people to understand what that vision forward looks like if you don't deal with it now.
Well, it's like if I don't go out with him or I go out with her, there may not be another one that comes around. I would rather take the devil I know for the devil I don't.
Right.
That's not a good trade.
If I have 95% of what I want, isn't that good enough?
If that 5% is part of the must-haves, then no, that's not a good trade.
Exactly.
And people don't get that.
No.
I used to not get that.
I didn't either. But when I learned, when I got it, the heavens opened up. Okay, I'm not going to sound really crazy, but the heavens did open up and deliver someone to me. But it was all in getting this one truth that we're talking about.
You know, when you create that roadmap, right, and you create the boundaries, this is what I'm looking for in someone. These are the must-haves, this they don't. What ultimately happens is you start to open yourself up to people that you probably wouldn't have done before because your priorities were completely out of whack. And people that before may have not fallen into your little piece of the pie chart, now that you've moved those pieces around, all of a sudden they do. So the heavens opened up where before you wouldn't have let them opened up because you were either focusing on something else or you didn't have your boundaries and your must-haves in place to really look at that person and say, hey, you know, based on what I got here, they're exactly what I'm looking for. In summary, my view, and I'll give you, I think you agree with me, to her, I don't think that there are any questions that she can ask. I don't think that there is one question that's going to get to the heart of everything. At the end of the day, it is always going to be about what you observe in the individual's behavior and in their character. And in the case of a single father, and I've written about this before, there is one thing that a woman who's dating a single father can observe that will tell her more about that man than anything else. The type of father he is. Because if he will not do the things that he needs to do to be a dad to his own kids, he sure in the hell won't do them to you. He will not be the type of man that you need if he's not going to be the type of father his kids need.
I agree with you. There are no questions that you can ask that are going to give you that certainty that we all look for when we are beginning to date someone. But I also want to stress the point that we also made, that there is, that when you know your must-haves, when you really know them, and someone bucks up against them and you observe things that really are not in alignment with what you must have, that is the moment, no matter when it is in your relationship, that you do need to ask the tough questions. You need to have the difficult conversations. You have to do it. Because if they're going to rear their ugly head at some point, might as not prolong the inevitable.
So the questions she needs to ask are questions to herself.
Excellent.
Laura, have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
You too, Kyle. Bye.